This is the third video for April 21st, MIS 4399, Chapter 6 from Silk and McDonald. So we were talking about privacy, the meanings of privacy. Privacy might be understood in terms of information control, or, in other words, the ability to control when, how, and to what extent information about us is communicated with others. For example, philosopher William Parent notes that defining privacy is difficult owing to the inconsistencies, ambiguities, and paradoxes in our language, but nevertheless defines privacy as the condition of not having undocumented personal knowledge about one possessed by others. However, one problem with this definition is that Parent believes that if that information is already a matter of public record, then you have no right to privacy. So, for example, if your employer were to look you up on social media and see your public posts and keep tabs on your social media, this would be entirely justified. This could be problematic in terms of AI. In 2012, a man walked into a Target angry that the store was sending his daughter coupons for pregnancy-related items, even though she was still in high school. It turns out, however, that Target was using a model that connected customers' names, demographic information, and purchase history to make recommendations. It suggested that there were strong correlations between certain purchases, such as unscented lotions, and being pregnant. The man later apologized when he found out that his daughter was indeed pregnant. In this case, the company was able to infer private information based on publicly available information to learn something that even the family wasn't aware of. AI permits additional similar kinds of applications where a model can make publicly available facts in the world and infer information that people might wish to keep private. For example, an algorithm developed for Twitter by a company called Hunch was able to look at who followed you on Twitter and who you followed and use that information to predict personal information about you. The algorithm could predict with about 85% accuracy your positions on same-sex marriage, abortion, what kind of media you watch, your spending habits, and more, even if this information was not public. We might say that an algorithm that is able to predict personal information like this is an invasion of privacy. But Parent's definition doesn't capture this sentiment. Let's consider a different definition of privacy. According to Stanley Benn, a general principle of privacy might be grounded on the more general principle of respect for persons. To conceive someone as a person is to see him as actually or potentially a chooser, as one attempting to steer his own course through the world. Whereas Parent might argue that once information becomes public record, there is no reasonable expectation of privacy. Ben might argue that observing us when we don't wish to be observed or when we are unaware of it changes and undermines our understanding of our own life experience and of our own self-respect. Anything that undermines us in this way is wrong unless we consent to being observed or recorded, regardless of whether the information is out in the open or not. These are only two definitions of privacy, but already we can tell that different definitions will yield different answers, so perhaps it is worth considering how we might want to define privacy with a mind to the practical cases that artificial intelligence will present. Even once we have a working definition of privacy, we must examine its scope. Consider the case of employment wellness programs, in which employers require that employees submit medical and health-related information to them to qualify for employee benefits. Otherwise, they will face a penalty. Some corporations require that employees reach a certain number of daily points by providing more information, or that employees maintain certain health metrics. Otherwise, they will have to pay a fee. This information can be sold to third-party companies who can use that data to build models to help market products. Not only does this mean that your employer can monitor your activities in your private life, but also that this information can be sold for profit. Is this a violation of your privacy? What if you consent? Can one really consent if you are only doing so under duress and otherwise resent the intrusion? What about if someone creates a deepfake of a celebrity using the thousands of photos of that person widely available online? Is this a violation of privacy to recreate someone's face without permission, even if it relies entirely on widely and publicly available photos? What about, as we've discussed in Chapter 5, if governments use cameras combined with facial recognition to monitor public places? Is there no such thing as privacy in a public place? Much of what makes questions like these tricky is trying to determine the limits of the public and private spheres. Are there occasions where the public might have a right to regulate certain private behaviors if they are in the public interest? For example, is getting vaccinated a personal private health choice, or does the potential risk to public health suggest that it isn't merely private? Questions like this suggest that there is no clear context-independent line when it comes to privacy, in terms of what takes place in the home compared to outside of it. A religious person who believes that a nation was founded to be a Christian society, for example, might believe in privacy, but more naturally think that issues like contraception or reproduction inherently fall within the public sphere. Philosopher Judith Jarvis Thomson argues that such cases reveal how difficult it is to argue them as a matter of privacy. The concept isn't clear enough to allow us to ethically distinguish between cases where we think a violation of privacy has taken place and where it hasn't. She argues, for example, that it is wrong to defend a right to abortion as a matter of privacy. Abortion, like many other issues that are commonly associated with privacy, are better justified as a matter of property rights than privacy rights, such that we understand our own bodies as being property which we have a right to control. In other words, privacy and a right to privacy are ambiguous concepts, and it isn't always clear what kinds of ethical issues fall within the scope of the concept of privacy. Alternatively, ethical disputes about privacy might not come down to the question of whether a certain area should be considered private at all. There may be agreement that while certain kinds of things are generally private, there might be an overwhelming public interest in this case. Given the historical origins and the complex cases we have discussed, some are skeptical about whether there is a right to privacy, and even if such a right can be coherently defined. Nevertheless, the concept has developed according to changing social circumstances and social problems. If privacy is an ethical concept used to help understand ethical problems, what is its value? Warren and Brandeis defended the value of privacy based on an inviolate personality. This means that the essence of a human being, including our individual dignity, integrity, and personal autonomy and independence, is respected. Privacy can also be valuable in that it is necessary for the formation of intimate relationships of love, trust, and respect. Even if we can't easily define privacy and its parameters, it is a socially and ethically important concept. Yet, as we've alluded to, novel social conditions create new problems and require critical thinking about the concept and what purpose we want it to have in moral discourse. AI requires massive data to produce reliable algorithms. Thus, there is a strong incentive to collect personal data. In turn, algorithms can be very effective at predicting potentially very private information about you, which can then be used to market things to you. This has created financial incentives to learn as much information about the habits of individuals as possible, and AI allows those who seek to profit from this information to operate on a large scale and in new ways. How should we understand the concept of privacy in the age of AI? Data sets present privacy concerns because the information could be hacked or stolen. To prevent this, many organizations anonymize their data sets. Nevertheless, even if the data is anonymous, it is relatively easy to cross-reference the information with other information known about a person to infer who they are. For example, to help create a better recommendation algorithm, Netflix released data sets containing movie ratings by their customers. The data contained a unique but meaningless ID number for each customer and data about their movie ratings. Even though no other information was released, if someone was aware of the approximate dates when a person had reviewed a few movies, this information could be cross-referenced with other databases online to uniquely identify people 99% of the time. Even revealing simple movie ratings can be an invasion of privacy in that it can reveal things like political leanings and sexual orientation. To prevent anonymous recordings being cross-referenced with other information to identify unique personal records, one solution is to introduce what's known as K-anonymity. The idea is to redact information from the data set so that no single data record is unique. Imagine, for example, that you were looking at anonymous hospital records and were trying to identify patients. There are no names, but they do include information such as age, postal codes, and gender. If we know that Sally was a 35-year-old female who lived in a certain region, and there is only one anonymous record of a 35-year-old female who lives in that region in the data set, and we can reasonably infer that the record belongs to Sally. The purpose of K-anonymity is to withhold enough information so that there are no unique records that can be easily correlated with other information to infer that identity. A data set can be said to be K-anonymous if any combination of attributes in the data set matches at least K number of individuals. We will continue this discussion in the fourth video for April 21st.